welcome to another episode of our TPR livestream. Today we are going to be talking about those pesky little comma splices that maybe you've been accused of using by a teacher, and maybe you want to learn how to improve your sentences and avoid that horrible comma splice. But before I define what it is, let's begin as we always do with a warm-up. So go ahead, grab a piece of paper, pencil, something to write on, something to write with, and let's take a look at our warm-up sentences today. So we've got 4 sentences. Some of them are correct, some of them are not. I won't tell you how many. And you can just write down numbers 1 through 4. We'll see the screen again at the very end of the presentation, but mark down which you think are correct versus incorrect now before we get into the lesson. So number 1 says, when he was younger, Simon played baseball. Number 2, they danced for hours, they danced the night away. Number 3, I want to go running, but it's going to rain soon. And number 4, Amelia went to the beach and she had a relaxing morning. So mark it, whatever you think is correct versus incorrect, and we will jump into the next slide now. Okay, so what is a comma splice? Have you ever gotten an essay back with your teacher having written comma splice in red, and you're just like, what is a comma splice? I don't get it. There's a comma, but what's a splice? Well, a comma splice means that you misuse the comma. There's something wrong with it. More specifically, a comma splice occurs when you have 2 independent clauses, which is the same as saying 2 complete sentences that are joined by a comma. So it's like complete sentence, comma, complete sentence. We'll briefly look at what an incomplete versus incomplete sentence is in just a second. And because a comma splice is incorrect punctuation, it leads to a run-on sentence. All right, so complete sentence, what does that mean? All right. We have a few different examples here, and I'll briefly get into intransitive versus transitive. We're not presenting on that today, but in a nutshell, an intransitive verb is a verb that doesn't take an object. So as in this example sentence here, Jessica sings nicely, right? But we don't need the word nicely. I could just say, Jessica sings. That's a complete sentence because the verb sings doesn't need something to come after it. Specifically, it doesn't need an object to come after it. So for a sentence to be complete when you're dealing with an intransitive verb, you just need to have a subject and a verb. Now, for that to be incomplete, it's either lacking a subject or a verb when you have an intransitive. So Jessica nicely or sings nicely, neither of those would be complete because something's missing. Now, when you get into your transitive verbs, these are verbs that need something to come after the verb. So, Jessica wants a new car. That's a complete sentence. We know what it is that Jessica wants. Whereas in the next sentence here, Jessica wants. Well, if I came up to you and said, hey, Jessica wants, you would be like, Jessica wants what? Right? You know something's missing because certain verbs need an object to come after. So for a complete sentence, when you're dealing with a transitive verb, you'll always have a subject, a verb, and an object. Whereas if that phrase or clause fragment is incomplete, you can be lacking a subject, a verb, or an object. I will open the floor to questions. As I'm sure someone has already commented, this is an interactive session, so if you have anything that needs to be clarified, please feel free to type it into the chat if you're streaming live. And if you're watching this video after the fact, you can always type in the comments below the video. So I'm going to go ahead here and move on to some examples of comma splices. So I'm talking about this comma splice, but you haven't seen one in action. So here's one. Tomatoes bruise easily. They're fragile. And here's another one. Marla didn't study. She failed the exam. The problem here is that a comma alone, and I emphasize alone, and you'll see why in just a few moments, Comma alone cannot separate two ideas, two complete ideas, that is. So we'll come back to these sentences and break them down in just a moment. But before that, let's talk about some of the different ways that we can fix, quote unquote, fix a comma splice. So to get rid of a comma splice, to eliminate it, to fix this problem, you can change the comma to a period because essentially you're dealing with two complete sentences. And as you know, two complete sentences can be separated by periods. That's an easy fix. You can also change the comma to a semicolon, which functionally speaking, a semicolon does the same thing as a period. It separates two complete ideas. Now, from a stylistic standpoint, you might have been accused of being semicolon happy or something from a teacher in a literature class. So stylistically, there's some nuances going on, but functionally, periods and semicolons both separate two complete ideas. Now, there are other things that you can do to remedy a comma splice. And one of the most common ones after the period and semicolon is to use a coordinating conjunction and a comma. So it'd be comma with one of these things over here. You see the word fanboys. This is just an acronym to help you remember your coordinating conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, yet. So, and we are going to see these in action. Okay, and I see a question here. Why did you show the complete version of the transitive and intransitive verbs if they are correct? So, okay, I'll take a step back quickly to address that. And, oops, let me get to the correct slide here. So, with our complete and incomplete sentences, the incompletes were not correct. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a lag going on here. And I'm not able to move my slides, so bear with me for just a moment. Okay, it seems that my slides are freezing up here, so I apologize for this. Just bear with me if I can see if I can get them moving again. I'm actually going to exit out and I'll come right back, so just a moment. Can someone in the chat box just confirm to me here in the classroom that I'm back up, please? Okay, great. Thank you, Shadna. All right, awesome. So I'm so sorry about that because we had a little glitch there. So someone had asked about the incomplete version of the transitive intransitive. The point there was to show that there are two different things that happen when we say a complete sentence needs a subject and a verb. Sometimes you actually also need an object. So these two sentences on the right column, the far right column, are incomplete. And this is important. I'll explain to you as we go forward where the incomplete comes into play and how we can kind of identify comma splices. So they're just examples to show what an incorrect version of those sentences would look like. Just let us know if that makes sense. Okay, so we'd already seen these guys, and we'll see them again. And let's go through to where we left off. So we talked about the comma fanboys, and those were our coordinating conjunctions, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And there's another type of conjunction that can be helpful when it comes to comma splices, and that's the subordinating conjunction. So these are words like after, since, until. There are so many if, once, because. With some skill, you can use those to remedy a comma splice situation, and you'll see some examples of that. And then another thing that you can do in some cases is you might be able to use a comma or a dash instead of the comma if the two independent clauses have some kind of a relationship. More specifically, it's going to be ideal if the second part of the sentence is some kind of an explanation related to the first one. So this last one is less common, but it is an option. And of course, you always have the option to just rewrite the sentence if you identify that you've got two complete ideas separated by a comma. That's the nice thing about writing. We can change up so many different things. There are lots of different ways of saying the same thing. Okay, so let's go back to that sad tomato again. So if we look here, if I hadn't told you that this was a comma splice, and you were looking at the sentence like, hey, tomatoes bruise easily, they're fragile, seems like it's all right, kind of slow down with that comma. But once you know the rule that a comma alone cannot stand between two complete ideas, you can identify that there's a problem. So there's a few ways to take a look at this and how to handle whether or not something is correct. So one thing you can do is literally draw a line in between the two parts of the sentence where that comma's at, and then ask yourself, is the first part complete? So tomatoes bruise easily. And this goes back to that question somebody had asked, why was I showing the incorrect correct of the different types of sentences? Well, if I'm able to identify that tomatoes bruise or tomatoes bruise easily is a complete sentence and it can stand alone, right? That's going to help me when I'm trying to detect whether or not I've got a comma splice at play. So if I were just reading this for the first time, say, okay, tomatoes bruise easily. Yeah, that's complete. It can stand on its own, right? And then you would look at the next part, they are fragile. Yep, that's a complete sentence also. So this is a way that you can check. All right, so we've identified that we have two complete sentences or two independent clauses, however you want to refer to them, same thing. And we need to fix the sentence. So as we saw, we can just stick a period there and change the word they, capitalize that T, right? Tomatoes bruise easily. They are fragile. We can also use a semicolon. And there's so many other ways that this could be remedied, but let's take a look at a subordinating conjunction. So now we have tomatoes bruise easily because they are fragile. That works. And if you notice, we took the comma away because you don't need to put a comma before because if it's in the middle of the sentence. Now you could also say because they are fragile, comma, tomatoes bruise easily. You see, we flipped it there and the comma would come if the because clause were at the beginning of the sentence. You can think about your fanboys here too. Remember, for and nor, but or yet so. You can actually use the first one here. Tomatoes bruise easily, comma, for they are fragile. Okay, that sounds kind of funky, right? We don't often use for in our everyday speaking these days, but for pretty much means the same thing as because. So you would just say, comma, for, they are fragile. But you wouldn't say, for example, tomatoes bruise easily, comma, yet they are fragile, because that's not showing the relationship. The two things go together. You could say tomatoes bruise easily, comma, and they are fragile, but that meaning is going to be a little bit different from the meaning of this last sentence, that they bruise easily because they're fragile. The because shows that there's a relationship between the two. Because they're fragile, they bruise easily. Okay, so as you see here, you can use the subordinating conjunction, and you can use the coordinating conjunctions. You could decide to completely reword this thing in a variety of ways, and you can eliminate that comma splice situation. So let's go back to the other sentence that we saw with poor Marlo who didn't study, and we could do the same thing. You already know that this is a splice, comma splice, but we could draw that vertical line and break down each part of the sentence. We could say, Marla didn't study. That's complete. And she failed the exam. That's also complete. So just like in the previous sentence, we can put a period and change the letter to an uppercase one with the word she here. Or we can use a semicolon. And we can also look at the cause effect situation here. Marla didn't study, comma, so she failed the exam. And now we have an example of a fanboy. Now you see it printed. We discussed a few of them on the previous slide. You could flip it and say, if it were a different situation, Marla studied, comma, yet she failed the exam. Or Marla studied, comma, but she failed the exam. So there's a different relationship going. It's a but, it's a contrast. Even though she did this thing, something that she didn't expect happened. Or you could even use, if you wanted to use a colon or a dash here, you could say Marla didn't study, dash, she failed the exam. And colons and dashes are very interesting. They're very often misused, but one thing to keep in mind is that whatever comes before a colon or a dash in all of your writing, whether it's in this situation, this type of sentence, or another, it has to be a complete sentence. So you need to have a complete sentence and then colon or dash. And then what comes after can be complete or incomplete. That's a whole nother thing to get into. Today we're looking at only completes and completes. So that is an option. Stylistically, you do want to make sure that there's a relationship between those two clauses. So this is a cause effect. She didn't study, therefore she failed the exam. That's another thing you could put in there. You could say, Marla didn't study, semicolon, therefore, comma, she failed the exam. So really, when you're remedying your comma splices, you have to look at how do the two clauses relate. And from there, you can decide which options work best for improving your sentence and fixing any grammatical mistakes. Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point here? I will give it just a moment to see if anybody needs any kind of clarification. Because from here, we're gonna try a few, you guys are gonna try a few on your own. So if something comes up, just go ahead and type it in the chat. And in the meantime, I will show you our next sentences that you guys are gonna try on your own. So, your job now, determine whether each sentence is correct as written. So number 1, the future is unknown. Only time will tell. We can take that vertical line test that we did and put it into play here, because now you don't know whether this is incomplete, complete. So if we draw the vertical line right down the middle, if you ask yourself, the future is unknown, is that complete or incomplete? Can it stand on its own? The future is unknown. It's complete, right? That can totally stand on its own. And the next part, only time will tell. Only time will tell. That's also complete. So we've got 2 complete sentences, and the only thing separating them is a comma, which means that this is not correct as written. So you could use a dash or a colon here. You could use period, semicolon, you can reword it. I don't think you would really want to use one of your fanboys here. The future is unknown, yet time will tell, yet only time will tell is not what we're going for. So really when you're changing your sentence to remedy comma splice, you just want to sit there and think about the relationship. Make sure that it makes sense what you're plugging in and changing. So let's look at another one. I needed a new dress, so I went shopping. Okay, if we do that vertical line situation again, we would want to do it before the comma and after the word so, because so is one of those fanboys. So it kind of, you can think of it as almost being a punctuation. It's not, but it goes with the comma and it functions as one. So I need a new dress. I needed, that's a transitive sentence. Needed what? A new dress. So that's complete. I went shopping. That's also complete. So this one is correct as written because this one has the comma before the fanboy. If it didn't have the comma and it only had the word so, I needed a new dress, so I went shopping, that wouldn't work. If it were just a comma and no so, it wouldn't work either. You need the comma and the fanboy, comma and the so in this case. So the next one here, number 3, Monique wanted to buy eggs, the grocery store was closed. I'll leave you guys to do this one on your own for just a few moments. So determine whether or not this is okay as it is. And first ask yourself whether you've got 2 complete sentences or 2 complete ideas or not. So in this case, we are not okay, right? In this situation, we do have 2 complete ideas. Monique wanted to buy eggs is complete. The grocery store was closed, also complete. What could you put in here? You could put a fanboy. You could say Monique wanted to buy eggs, but the grocery store was closed. You wouldn't want to say, so the grocery store was closed, because that would change the meaning. You could do a period, semicolon, and a whole host of other things. So take a look at number 4. She doesn't eat meat. She's a vegetarian. Again, take a moment here on your own. Try to determine whether or not this is correct. And if it's not correct, think of some ways to rewrite it on your own. As you're doing that, let me take a look at this question. Are fanboys coordinating conjunctions? Are they preceded by a comma? Yes, fanboys are coordinating conjunctions. So fanboys is just an acronym, like literally the word fanboys to remember for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. The 7 conjunctions that are that type. So they're not always used with a comma. There are other things that can be in play. For example, I could say, my friends and I like playing tennis, right? My friends and I. Now just connecting my friends and I, it's not used in this way. So this is one way that that fanboy slash coordinating conjunction is being used. And when it's used to separate 2 complete ideas, it must have a comma separating the 2 complete ideas. So comma with your fanboy. Let me know, House of Hawk, if that makes sense. If you have any more follow-up questions, just type them in. So back to number 4, she doesn't eat meat, she's a vegetarian. Those are both complete sentences, which means this is not okay as it is, right? Because we need something to separate them. It could be period, it could be a colon, it could be a dash. If we want to emphasize, the dash is more for emphasis and it's a little bit more informal than the colon is. She doesn't eat meat, comma, and she's vegetarian isn't really the right situation there because it's because she's vegetarian, she doesn't eat meat. That could work. She doesn't eat meat because she's a vegetarian. So again, thinking about the relationship between things. And one last one here. You shouldn't drink that, comma, because it's bad for you. So take a moment to decide whether this is correct or not. And this one is a little bit of a trick. So it's Not correct. And here's the situation. So you shouldn't drink that, right? That's complete. It can stand on its own. It's bad for you is also complete. The because makes it incomplete, but it works. It's your subordinating conjunction. However, you don't want to use that comma here. This comma wouldn't come before the because in the middle of the sentence. So there would just be nothing. You shouldn't drink that space because it's bad for you. So now it's correct with that crossed off, but we'll say X because as it was typed, it was incorrect. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in. And I will go back to those first 4 sentences that we saw at the beginning of this presentation here. And in the side box here, you see sentence variety improves the overall quality of writing. So the more ways you can think of to reword things, the better and stronger writer you'll become. And you can start to switch up your sentence structure and style. Okay, so these 4 sentences again. When he was younger, Simon played baseball. If you said that's correct, you are correct. Why is that comma okay? Well, that comma is okay because we do not have 2 complete ideas going on. If you draw that vertical line down and you look at the first part, it just says when he was younger. When he was younger. There's no thing happening here. When he was younger, what? We don't know. So we can't say that's complete. If someone just came up to you and said, when he was younger, you would be like, when he was younger, what? I don't know. You got to finish that sentence. So since that's incomplete, and the next part here, Simon played baseball, that is complete, you can put a comma between them. You just can't have the comma alone between 2 completes. I will go back to number 5 after I finish these 4. So go ahead and continue typing in any questions about the previous set of questions, and I'll finish going through these and go back to them. So number 1, correct as written. Number 2, they danced for hours. They danced the night away. Try a vertical line test here to see what's going on. They danced for hours. That's complete, right? That can stand alone. They danced the night away. That is also complete. So that means number 2 is wrong because we can't just have a comma there. They danced for hours, period. They danced the night away, or semicolon, or a colon, or maybe a dash. All right, number 3, I want to go running, comma, but it's going to rain soon. So remember, when you're dealing with one of your fanboys, those coordinating conjunctions, you don't want to count that as either part of the sentence because it's connecting your sentences. So I want to go running. That's complete. It's going to rain soon. That's also complete. So number 3 is correct as written. Oh, that's a terrible check mark on my end. Let me redo that. There we go. Correct as written because I put a comma and a fanboy. If I just had the comma or just had the but, it would not be correct. I see a question here. My lawn, but the grass was still tall. I think something maybe didn't copy over. Was there something before my lawn? I mowed my lawn. Okay, yes. I mowed my lawn, comma, but the grass was still tall. Yes, you do need that comma before it because you have 2 complete ideas. So you said, I mowed my lawn. That's complete, right? You could just say that, leave it, it's good to go. The grass was still tall. That's also complete. So you would need that comma but. So that is an example of a fanboy being used correctly. I mowed my grass, comma, or I mowed my lawn, comma, but the grass was still tall. Okay, let me know if you have any follow-ups to that question. And our last one to go through from our initial warm-up, Amelia went to the beach and she had a relaxing morning. So this one, it's another fanboy situation. There's no comma in it. So if we draw those lines and pretend the word and's not there, Amelia went to the beach. That is complete, right? That can stand on its own. She had a relaxing morning. That is also complete. So number 4 is going to be incorrect because we're missing the comma with the fanboy. We've got 2 complete ideas and there's no comma before the fanboy. So we would have to do comma and to make it correct. So a different situation, another way to kind of look at this last sentence here, we could say, I'm going to type this here, Amelia went to the beach and had a relaxing morning. Period. Just move this. Okay. Amelia went to the beach and had a relaxing, oh, I did not type morning correctly. Couldn't see it. There we go. And had a relaxing morning. Now this is correct. Can you see what the difference is here? I took out the word she. So now if you were to look at this and think of it as 2, you draw those 2 vertical lines around the and, Amelia went to the beach. That's complete. Had a relaxing morning is no longer complete because we took the she out. So for this one, you wouldn't need the comma before the fanboy. Hopefully that example here clears up some of this confusion because a lot of times we're not sure, do I need the comma? Do I use the comma? What's going on? So this next question said, when I see these fanboys connecting words and there are 2 complete thoughts, should I always put a comma before fanboys? Yes, whenever there are 2 complete ideas, 2 independent clauses that can stand on their own, you always need to have a comma before that fanboy that's connecting those 2 clauses. Okay. Let me know if you guys have any more coordinating conjunction questions there. And I will go back to number 5 on the previous slide now. So, okay, that was the one that said you shouldn't drink that because it's bad for you. So really the only problem with number 5 is that you don't put the comma before the because. That's another common mistake that a lot of people make, whereas your coordinating conjunctions, the fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, those guys always get a comma before them when they're being used to separate 2 complete ideas. But because is a subordinating conjunction. It's a different kind of conjunction. And it does not get the comma before it in the middle of the sentence. In fact, it's not going to have a comma before it. The other way to reword this and use a comma would be, because it's bad for you, comma, you shouldn't drink that. So it's the same kind of with the word since, right? Since it's bad for you, comma, you shouldn't drink that. You shouldn't drink that since it's bad for you. Let me know if that makes sense. There are just lots of little nuanced rules to study and practice. So if anybody has any further questions, go ahead and type them in now. And that was our last little bit for today. So I'll hang out here for another few seconds, but if you don't have any questions now, you can always type them in the chat box or, sorry, in the comment section below the video, and we can answer them later on. So thank you all for tuning in today, and I will see you again next time.